Today I'm joined by daughter Michaela.
Yeah.
uh, Hello. Today I'm joined by daughter Michaela.
Yeah.
You
Nice.
started as an art student in art school,
Yes, that's
and
true.
you obtained your PhD in software engineering. You have a master degree in CS in computer science, and you do a lot of talks in both US and Europe.
Yeah, true.
And you work with a lot of teams like Microsoft, Flutter, Wix, and etc.
Different companies. Yeah,
Very
they're
different
quite,
companies.
yeah, very different companies. And I really like it. For a long time, I just worked with one company
Hmm.
in Microsoft. And so it was a big company. So it wasn't, but now with having so many very different companies, it's even more interesting. Yeah, to see all the different cultures and how people do stuff, right? Even Microsoft people had different ways of going about things, but now it's on another level. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and I guess it must be very interesting for you to see like how Microsoft works, which most people they think, well, you probably know how it works. So most people say that Microsoft is probably like imagine someone in a cubicle closed, and it's very structured, and you have all these rules and stuff. Whilst if you work for maybe a startup, it's completely different. So it must be interesting to see the whole different industries how they operate on their day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I wouldn't. So, coming from inside, I would not paint a picture like that about
Mhm.
Microsoft. But what I can say is that, I mean, this is maybe not really company culture or work related, but I was, when I moved to the US, for example, I was very surprised that not every office has a window, which
Okay.
was, this was really drastic for me. I mean, I think in Austria, we are not even allowed to have an office without a window, right? There's like a basic human rights that people are enforcing. And so I knew exactly that when I was starting at Microsoft, and then they go by tenure. So they go how long you are actually at Microsoft. And the longer you are, the higher is your privilege to get a window, right? So the
Mhm.
first 10 years you probably without window or something like that, right?
Yeah, you need to
And
stay in the
so
dark cave first.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it depends also which building you are in, and then when they had like so the, some of the buildings and some of the teams they are really in offices, right? And then some
Mhm.
of them are in this open space. And so because of the window situation, I actually prefer to open office because then you
Yep.
had window, right? At least two desks from you there was a window or something like that. Yeah,
And
but
that really helps with your productivity as well if you actually have some natural light instead of all dark and
I couldn't imagine. So I think I would have quit immediately. I was a
Mhm.
little bit shocked actually when I started working there, right? Everything was perfect. I would say it was my dream job. But that I didn't have a window was really a big thing. And actually, I had a window when I started. But then we moved to another building, and this was one of the oldest buildings on the Microsoft campus. If I recall correctly, it was building 21, and nobody liked building 21, right? And so when we had to move there as a team, everybody was like, "Oh my God, you have to go to 21." And so my window then was really an internal window. Sorry, my office was an internal office, right? So
Mhm.
there was just the door, and there were all the walls were without window, right? And so this was really really bad, and I was very very unhappy. Um, but it was only temporary, thanks God. So we actually, this was a temporary solution, and then we moved into, I think it was 16 or 18, something like that. And this was one of the newest buildings, and this was really cool then. But yeah, but at that point, I actually mostly worked from home. So I said, I cannot work in this office space. It's, I get a
and
depression or something.
I know
It's
that
impossible.
more companies now are doing remote work, and I think I'm very I really enjoy the whole idea of remote work because just the fact that you don't have to commute for 1 hour. to go to the office, and then you're tired and you're commuting back maybe 1 hour. So that's 2 hours that you waste. Instead, maybe you could spend the first hour just doing some exercise, taking care of yourself, and then you can start the whole job with a better head, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of remote work, and I actually
Hmm.
worked a lot of my career in a remote setting, at least temporary, right? So even when I was on campus in the States, I worked a lot from home. I would probably go almost every day to the office, but I just was there for a couple of hours, for all the important things. I worked with a lot of different teams. So I had to go from the office building to the Windows building to, exchange or something like that, right? So I was meeting with the people that were where I had important stuff to discuss, and then was doing the productive work actually from home. And I enjoyed it a lot because, as I explained, well, if you have like a really awful setting, you can go home and you have like your office in a way that is comfortable for you. And for me, that's really important. I can be very productive and I feel good, right? If I have like my coffee and my water and my chair, and everything is like I actually like it.
Yeah, and you can
um
make your space to to make it how you want and how you feel more productive and more creative. So that makes sense.
exactly, yeah. And for me, being around people all day is really a battery drainer, right? So
Mm.
I'm really exhausted at one point when there are people all over. I really like to be with people, so I enjoyed going there and having these meetings and doing the stuff there. But then if I have to concentrate and do my work, I actually really enjoy that I'm at home. And if I make strange faces, I can make strange faces because I'm thinking, or I'm walking around if I have to solve a bigger problem or something like that. So I like that freedom very much. So I really like the remote setting. Whenever I commuted, I try to don't have like a large commute or long
Hmm.
commute, and that it's possible to do it by bike, for example. And so this was something that I also enjoy. Like if you have this bike ride, then somehow I feel this commute is part of my daily schedule of doing something healthy for myself, right? So you don't
Yeah.
have to think about, you have to do it. And also it can clear a little bit my thoughts about, you leave a little bit the office at the office and the home at home. But yeah, in general, I really like the remote setup. Yeah.
Do you think that doing some exercise does help you when you are stuck in a particular problem, and then just do some exercise, or like you say, go for a bike ride, and you let your brain just think it through?
Yeah, not only for problems, but in general, I
Hmm.
really see that for myself. If I'm not doing exercise enough, in general, if I'm just not cultivating healthy habits, right? Be it sleeping enough or having also a life outside of, I can be a person that gets very, very hang up in their work, right?
Hmm.
So when I have a problem, it's really hard for me to leave the desk and say, well, I'm doing something else, or I'm meeting friends or whatever, right? So I get a lot of passion also, and there's really a lot of good feelings about this, right? I really love my work. So I'm doing the work in the short term feels as it's healthy. It feels like I'm doing actually something good, and this I enjoy it. But then the long term effects, they're not really good, right? So I
Yeah.
really think it's important to think about going outside in nature, getting some sunlight, walking, yeah. And also being able to detach yourself maybe from your work. I think people have different ways how they are attached to their work, and I'm probably somebody that's very attached to their work, and I very much identify with that, and that can be very dangerous, right? So yeah, I think it's
That's
very
very
healthy to do something else.
Yeah, that's very good, because I do the same. When I'm stuck in a problem, I'm just like, I'm not leaving this chair if I don't fix the thing. I just keep thinking about it. And we always hear saying, yeah, you probably need to actually move out of that chair and do something else, because then it will be easier for you, because your brain will finally have a break and will be able to think it through. So, yeah. I have to ask you, you went from art school
Mhm.
to the IT world. How was that transition?
It was um It was actually a very long transition. That's the
Hmm.
first thing that I would probably say. And it was not completely planned. I also didn't really know what I get myself into, to be honest. Um, yeah, so I went to art school, and in my school, in my high school, we didn't even have computers, and I
Okay.
didn't have a computer at home. Well, my parents had a computer, but it was really expensive, or it was portrayed as something very expensive, right? So, and something that can break easily, so don't kids are not allowed to touch it. And in school, because it was like very this really artisan school, right? So people were more like, if you write a novel, you write it with paper and a pen, right?
Hmm.
This is how real novelists or how real writers go about their work. And the same for example, I specialized in photography. um, but at that point the digital thing were already there, but they were like, how can you do that? That's, it destroys the character of your thing. So we did really, I was developing pictures like with these different chemicals and in these dark rooms and things like that, right? And um, and then in the last year before going to university, I attended a couple of classes already. So in the afternoons, instead of doing something else, I was going to university, because I was very lost. I was like, oh my God, what should I do? What's my path? And I didn't want to continue this path, because I felt, if I have to make money by doing art, you know, this destroys the character
Mm.
from the art, not from myself, right? So for example, if somebody tells me, oh, I want a painting, and they can tell you exactly how the painting works or how it should look like, then for me it wasn't really art anymore, right? So this commissioned art thing wasn't really something that I wanted to do. I felt like I want to keep the passion in the art, that it's really independent of the money world, right? um I don't know, it was just a thought, a train thought of, a 18-year-old, something like that, or 17-year-old.
But as you say that, I think it's true. If you are paid to do something, you sort of restrict your creativity a bit because you know
Yeah,
that you want to deliver something that you like, but that the other person likes because that person is paying for it. So it makes sense.
it's strange. Yeah, and also because I was in this art school, we were judged by what we were doing, right? So you
Mm.
got like, for, I don't know what's the English word for it, but like if you had like an exam in art, then you got a different topic, and then somebody would judge your art, right? I mean, which was very strange for me, and it was very, I was very blocked by it, and I was like, I at one point, the teacher, so you know how to get a good grade for whatever they want, but it's not really art, it's not really what you wanted to do. And thought, well, if you go and sell your stuff, then this will just enhance, right? And so I was thinking, well, I want to do something else.
Hmm.
And but I wasn't sure what. So, and I went to different classes. I went actually, well, a lot of things, about psychology, because my mom is a psychologist. So I thought, well, I should look at that, but it wasn't for me. And then I went for, I think, mathematics, of course, because this is something that I thought I would like and I could do. And I ended up in a class about algorithms
Okay.
and databases. I think it was also about databases and, synchronization of databases and all the problems with race conditions and things like that. And I thought, this is so fascinating. And they were talking about a cache machine, and how you make sure that if somebody access um, your checking account, for example, that nobody else can actually access something, and race conditions, what would happen if two write on the same variable, things like that, right? And so I actually went back to this lecture, and I took the whole course because I was really, really fascinated. I thought, okay, I want to do this, right? But it was very scary because I didn't have a computer. And I mean, being in this class, everything was very analog, right?
Hmm.
There wasn't, nobody was having nobody was writing code, or nobody was having a laptop, right? So it was everything like just a PowerPoint that were presented. Actually, at that point, I think it wasn't even PowerPoint, right? It was like this projector foil
Yeah,
thing,
I
really old
remember
school.
those.
Yeah. And so then I bought a book actually about algorithms and what it is, and read it over the summer, and then I decided to do that.
Wow.
And
All right.
yeah. And then I went into that, and it was very difficult at the beginning because the the first year of university was definitely made for people that have already done some specialization in programming. So most of my peers already knew how to program. They had a
Mhm.
computer, they know the internet and things like that, right? I was really like very green. And I didn't even manage to enroll because you had to, there was an online enrollment, and somehow
Oh, okay.
I don't recall what I messed up, but I messed up something with the password. I don't know what it was. And so I went to the IT department and said, oh, I'm really having troubles enrolling online. And so they helped me. And then he said, so what should we enroll you for? And I said, yeah, computer science. And they were like really laughing about me. And like, are you sure maybe that's not the best study for you? But yeah, I studied a lot, probably especially in the first year. And then I caught up, and
Mhm.
then I really liked it. So it was also, there was enough interest to make it through.
I think that's the most valuable thing is if you are really interested in learning a subject, that's when you learn the best. It's if you have a specific thing that you need to study because it's part of your course and you need good grades, you're probably not going to enjoy studying it. But if it's something that you really like and it's something that you are passionate about, it's very easy for you to study because it doesn't feel like a chore. It's just something that you just do it because you like it. So I think
Yeah.
also if you didn't have that math background, it must be really hard to do that jump and go into the CS, do a CS bachelor degree.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, I think that, so I, in my art school, we had art, but we also had like quite a lot of mathematics, right? And so
Okay.
I had analysis there and all of that stuff. And so in later semesters, actually my CS degree, there was a lot of math when I
Mhm.
studied it. I think they changed it over time and they reduced that. But back then when I studied it, there was a lot of math there. And there was definitely a lot of math that I had no idea. So was really new to, but I thought that even for my peers that are coming from a computer science background, so they were doing high schools with the computer science or it's not computer science, it's programming specialization, for example. So they could already
Mhm.
program, but normally they had less math and less like this very fundamental math constructs. And so they were struggling a little bit more at that point. And I think they didn't have, most of them didn't enjoy it. So they kept struggling because
Yeah,
yeah, they didn't enjoy it,
that's
right? So
interesting. I wouldn't think
going,
that the art degree would give you such in-depth math, but then I guess you had lots of geometry and all that stuff that you sort of need to know anyway. So maybe that's why.
yeah, and so my school was, it was a normal, so in Austria it's called gymnasium, right?
Mhm. That's
And
similar to Polish actually.
yeah,
Yeah, in Poland they
and,
have a gymnasium as well.
yeah, and so this has a very fundamental education, right? So you're
Mhm.
not trained for something specific, like I don't know, for accounting or for programming or something like that, right? There are schools that are directly for that, but a gymnasium would be very, very general education, but very deep education for that path, right? So there would be, as I said, a lot of math, a lot of languages. So I had like Italian, English and German, right? So there were three languages that you had until the end. Um, and you also have like physics, chemistry, and all of those stuff, right? But there was definitely more fundamental math happening than, for example, for the schools that had like this programming education.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes the technical schools or the technical courses they focus a bit too much on that specific thing, and then all the other stuff are mostly just you touch a little bit here, a little bit there. Because in
Yeah.
high school, I did a communications and journalism degree, which the
Hmm.
only math I had was statistics and how to make
Okay.
graphics, uh, uh, how to make graphs. That's it. So when I started learning algorithms, and I still, from time to time, I go back and try to remind myself because I'm not great at it. I struggle a bit because the level of math that they expect is really high
Hmm.
compared to what I have. I actually spent about a year on Khan Academy and I did the math lessons every single day because I was trying to catch up with all the things that I didn't really learn because I had
Mhm.
math until year 9 in Portugal. And then after year 9, you go to high school. And yeah, I know I missed a lot of things. So I was trying to
Yeah.
catch up. So how did you find that passion about code reviews?
Well, code reviews, yeah. I a little bit stumbled into that. So my background comes from empirical software engineering. So empirical software engineering is if you are, is more or less studying or software engineering by looking at data and looking at empirical incidences, right? So how are people
Mhm.
doing it, right? So and I looked at different practices. I did a lot of things on testing. So this was actually my PhD was also very related to testing and to how people understand software.
Okay, that's
And
very
well,
interesting.
yeah, and so I was studying how would you help people understand which part of their systems are tested in a very large um, service service oriented architecture, right?
Hmm.
And so I was building, for example, different models, different abstractions, and then have different experiments to see if engineers actually, if that makes sense to them, if it's helpful, if it's not helpful. And also how they in general would test their systems and where there are some problems with it. And so especially this understanding part is definitely part also of code reviews, right? Because we have to understand software, we had to comprehend software. And so I think there was a little bit of that already. And then when I started working for Microsoft and Microsoft Research first and then Microsoft, I was working in a team that was looking at different software engineering practices, right? So again, we were looking at testing, we were looking at code reviews, we were looking at build. A lot of things were based on build. And we were looking how can we actually make the engineering practices, processes, and tools, so all those three things, better for the 40,000 engineers that we had, right? And code reviews was something that we invested actually a lot of time in.
Hmm.
There was a wonderful colleague, Chris Bird, for example. He was working a lot on code reviews. And um, at that point, we had data on that people were spending on average 6 hours per week on code reviews, right? So 40,000 engineers were spending 6 hours per week on code reviews. And this number definitely went up in the last 10 years, right?
Hmm.
But even 6 hours is something that's fundamental enough that you really want to understand, well, is that helping? And not only is it helping, that was one question, but the other question was, we know for some people it's not working, for some teams it's not working, right? We also know that for some teams they're doing really good job, right? So they would never give up their code reviews because they're getting so many benefits out of them.
Hmm.
And so this is where we started really to investigate why is that happening? What are the differences between the different teams? Why are some struggling from the pitfalls? Why are some getting all these benefits out of them? And how can we make the processes, practices, and also the tool better, right? So in our team, we had also we were developing and owning the internal code review tool from Microsoft, CodeFlow. And so we were improving that tool, and we were improving the practices of the engineering teams. And I got really sucked into it, right? So I really loved it. I also loved the testing part. I loved the build part. But this was so interesting because it's so socio-technical. Socio-technical means that, well, on one hand, it's super technical, right? So
Hmm.
you have to know your stuff to be good at code reviews. You have to really know to give valuable feedback. You have to know everything. But on the other hand, you also have to know how to communicate, right? So you can
Yeah.
be the brilliant the person and know everything if you can't communicate uh, good in a good way, or resolve conflicts, or be pragmatic and all of that, right? So if you don't have these social skills, then you will fail also in your practice. And yeah, so I was really fascinated by that, and so this is somehow why I then specialized more and more in code reviews.
Okay. And you are also in the process of finishing off or writing a book called the Code Review Book. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm actually doing that
Was
together with a friend of mine,
Mhm.
also a wonderful researcher on code reviews. So together we are writing this book, and we are sort of in the middle, I would say. So it's
Okay.
planned that it will we will finish it by spring 2021, right? So it's a
Mhm.
big book, and there will be a lot of research in it. I think it will be a really nice book, but yeah, it takes some time to write.
Yeah. Did you think that you were finding that on your workshops about code reviews and when you're talking with other developers, you're sort of saying the same thing and you thought, okay, I need to put all this knowledge in a book because people will definitely find value over this?
Yeah, I definitely. So there are not a lot of books on code reviews.
Hmm.
So this was definitely something that I thought, well, this is missing. And then when I started to really specialize in code reviews, I was also a little bit worried at that point. I was like, oh, is there enough to know about code reviews, right? So how long can you learn something about code reviews? How long can you specialize in code reviews? And when will it be, like you say, there's nothing new to learn, but I haven't reached that point, right? So every
Hmm.
day I'm learning something about code reviews. I'm working with really a lot of people. I'm giving those workshops, and even in each workshop, I'm learning something new, right? New problems people have, new ways people do code reviews. And so I'm acquiring all this knowledge about it. And I haven't seen any resources, that are only a fraction of what I know about code reviews. So I thought this is definitely something that I should bring to paper and yeah, get out there.
I agree with that. When you said that you were looking for people to sort of test or read through your initial work of the book, I volunteered as well because this is
Yeah.
one thing that sometimes I struggle as an open source maintainer. Not so much as reviewing something from a new contributor,
Hmm.
but the thing that I struggle the most is trying to review something from someone that's higher than me. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of developers they feel the same. I know that Eva, when we had our talk, and sometimes when we talk outside that talk, she does say like when the seniors say, "Oh, can you just do the code review?" She feels a bit like, uh, "You know more than me. What am I supposed to check in your code that I can give input?" So sometimes it's really hard for me as well to look at maybe a code PR raised by Jacob, the creator of the project that I maintain, and sometimes I say, "Yeah, it looks good," because I don't know anything else to put there. Do you
Yeah.
have any sort of suggestions, any tips for junior developers how to give a good code review in this case?
Yeah, so I think that what you are experiencing is very common. I see that a
Hmm.
lot. I see that also. Um, I think where there's really a powerful positive contribution that I can do in that space is when there are corporate trainings, right? So sometimes, so I have these individual workshops where you can book one ticket, but I also what I'm doing a lot is workshops for a whole corporation, a whole business, right? So a team, for example. And so there will be like, let's say 20 people, and then there are like seniors in the group and there are juniors in the group. And this comes up a lot for juniors, right? So what should I say? And how can I do a code review? How can I overcome also a little bit this imposter syndrome? But also, what should I look at? And there aren't really a lot of books, blog posts, classes out there that somehow prepare you, right? And
Hmm.
um, so I think that the workshops are really, really powerful here. So they help a lot, and I get also a lot of really wonderful feedback from people that are juniors on that they are now much more settled in what they can do. But a few tips that I can tell you is have a code review checklist. This is
Okay.
really, really powerful. If you have one, this somehow gives you like a complete list of the things that I can look at, right? The second is also that we have to, and this is a part of the book, it's actually a chapter that I'm writing currently right now, is about that we have to change our perspective a little bit, right? So there's like this perspective of the code reviewer and then the code author. And normally
Hmm.
you have like the code author is criticized by the reviewer, right? So you have like this hierarchy based on the roles, but you also have a hierarchy based on senior and junior.
Yeah.
And so the question is, what can juniors contribute to code reviews? Can they contribute something? And I say they definitely can contribute something, right? And this has to do with confidence, but also with understanding your strengths, where you know something, right? And looking at the code. And it could be, it could be that you learn something because you're junior, you learn something that's now less outdated, something that the senior does, right? For example. But also it doesn't always have that it's not always that we have to lecture each other, right? It's just an exchange of ideas that can happen in code reviews. But yeah, a code review checklist definitely is helpful. And training a little bit, like really a training on, what are the things that I can look for. And with this code review checklist, for example, what you could do is you could educate yourself in those areas, right? So the best code review checklist is the one that you tailor to your needs. But let's say you are a Python developer, right? So what you can do as a junior is make yourself a little bit a plan based on this checklist that you educate yourself and you're getting better. Let's say accessibility, right? So what do we know about accessibility? And I use this now as an example because I think many people, even if they're senior, have no idea about accessibility, right? Or security. Yeah. And then you could read up and learn, and then look especially for the things that you just learned in code reviews, for example, just to get your confidence a little bit out there. And grow your skills also, especially the technical skills, right? But there's a lot of social skills as well. And so it's not only what you find, but also how do you address it then, right? How do you say it? And I have actually a blog post about this, which is about how to give respectful code review feedback. And there's I did a YouTube video about this as well.
I was going to say, I actually saw that video and it's very good.
Oh, yeah.
I think if people don't like to read stuff, which I think we all should because we spend a lot of time reading documentation, so it should be fine reading. But if you don't want to read that blog post, watch the video. It has so many good things there that I'm going to put it in the episode description because it's a very good video. Yeah.
And I think it can also help because it shows a little bit how you can phrase the feedback in a very respectful way, right? And if you have like this, if you feel there's a hierarchy, right, or a difference in expertise and things like that, then knowing how to phrase something is very, very important as well.
Yeah, it's what you said. The code reviews is not just about code, it's about communication. And it's one thing that the more I talk with developers, the more the whole communication is key comes to the topic. It's always, yes, you need to know how to code properly, you need to know how to test stuff, but also you are working with a team. So communication is important, and it's something that you can definitely train. It's something that it's a skill like any other skill. You just need to get out there, meet people, go to meetups. It's going to be very terrible, very frightening at first, but the more you do, the more it gets easier and you'll be better at it. So yeah.
You can definitely learn it, right? And there are many nice so one thing that I, for example, teach in my code review workshop, it's called a nonviolent communication. You can read it up on the internet. There are a lot of resources on it, and there's also a really good book. I would actually recommend the original book from Roosevelt that wrote that invented this methodology, right? And I like it a lot because, especially for us as developer, where we have like this very structured thought and we like algorithms, it gives you really a step-by-step guide on how you can resolve conflicts and how you can communicate more effectively and without hurting the feelings of others. So this is also definitely something that I suggest.
Is that something related to the 5 A's or the 4 A's?
It's different. So
okay.
What you have here with nonviolent communication, you have more you have like needs. So it's about identifying something, right? It's about identifying, for example, when somebody says something, it's about what I said now, is it an evaluation or an observation, right? So this is how we start with nonviolent information, right? So the first step would be whenever we are talking, and especially for code reviews, this is also important. Let's do an observation and not an evaluation, right? So an evaluation would be this bad, this code is bad. It's an
Yeah.
evaluation. You could say this code has 1,000 lines of code, right? Or this method has 1,000 lines of code, right? So
Mhm.
there's no evaluation, and then you could actually put an evaluation later on, right? So but you separate those two things, right? This single method has 1,000 lines of code, I think, right? And this is like owning your feedback. I think this is not optimal, right? So this is the evaluation, but you separated it, and very often we just have the evaluation whenever we are talking with people, and this has to do how our brain works. That we can quickly evaluate things. So this is really natural, but it's not very helpful, right? If I'm just telling you, well, this code is too long, this code is not nice, right? These are all evaluations, but they are not observations. You cannot really do something with it. And so the first step would be to separate observation from evaluation. And then the second is understanding needs. So why is that a problem? What's the need behind that we actually have to fulfill, right? And especially for nonviolent communication, people would also talk about feelings, right? So how does this make me feel, you feel, right? So thinking about that, and then coupling those feelings also to our needs. And if we transfer this nonviolent communication actually to code reviews, there's this observation impact request rule, right? It's very similar. So whenever you're giving feedback, you're thinking first, what's the observation that I'm seeing here? What's happening in this code? And try to describe it as objective as possible. And then what's the impact that it has, right? So let's go back to this example that we have. This method has 1,000 lines of code, right? What's the impact? So much code makes it hard to read, for example, right? So it would be the impact. And then you have the request. Could you maybe, split it up in several different methods like this, or, maybe you give some references depending on whom you're talking to. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, the only thing I remember about the 5 A's or something is because
Yeah.
I'm a cabin crew, so flight attendant, and this is one thing that we kept drilled into training is the whole how to de-escalate a situation, which I think for the airline that I work for, we are quite good at de-escalate situations because we never had or we had one case of a physical assault, but we always were able to de-escalate a very bad situation very easy, and we're always. But that's what you said. It seems really really important when you're doing not just with code reviews but with everything.
Yeah.
So you said the book is from Roswell. Do you remember the title?
Yes. Nonviolent communication von Marshall Roswell, I think.
Okay. I will link with you that, and then I'll put it in the description as well.
It's really good. I mean, it's an old book, but I think there's a lot of almost everything is still the same valuable as it was before. It's not directly for code reviews, but as you said, you can use it for everything, right? It's very powerful if you're a parent as well. For example, dealing with your kids and dealing with kids' feeling as well, right? Because very often, and also with partners, very often we are very judgy, we are very evaluational. I don't know if that's the English word, but have a lot of evaluations in our spoken language as in our written language. And so just this first thing, changing from evaluation to observation, can be very powerful for many things. Yeah.
It's just the fact that when you say something in a evaluative way, the other person always feels attacked in a way, even if you're trying to come in a positive feeling or in a positive light. Sometimes folks are like, okay, this person is trying to attack me, or because I'm not good enough, or this, and then all these doubts that we struggle every day, they always go around our heads like, okay, so this was attack, I need to attack back. So that I'm going to get the book and I'm going to read it from cover to cover, I think.
Yeah, it's really good. I can really recommend it. And it's not only that they feel judged, but it's also that evaluation has a lot to do with our values, right? With how we are raised, how we are growing up, our environment that we are used to, right? So all that baggage comes with the evaluation that we are doing, and it's very independent of the observation that you did, right? So I have a few nice examples that I actually have in my code review workshops that we are discussing there with my participants, right? And So for example, let me get one on the top of my head. Let's say you say Doug procrastinates.
Hmm.
Right? So you're coming to your colleague and you say, well, actually Doug procrastinates. And then the question is that now an evaluation or is it an observation?
I think it can be both.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you are observing that the dog procrastinates, but also you are saying that, so you are sort of judging Doug's
Okay.
actions.
Well, when we are looking at this situation, then procrastination is actually a verb. It's a verb. So that's why we feel maybe it's an observation, but it's a verb with an evaluative connotation, right? And what we actually observe is probably not Doug procrastinating because we can't judge, we can't actually say, but we
Hmm.
see that he hasn't started working on a project, right? So that would be, if you're taking this context and you're really thinking about what would be the observation of this whole situation, it would be, well, Doug hasn't started the work on this project.
Yeah.
Um, and this is independent of the evaluation, right? And there are many of those things. And I think if you train that a little bit, you get really good at it. I mean, you have to. I try to do that actually every day, especially with my kids. um, because yeah, I think it brings you to a new level also in your relationships. They are much richer and there is less finger pointing and blaming if you manage to, you have to train your thought process and just your, yeah, that you detect that you're doing this, right? So whenever I'm doing it, very often I know, okay, now I was very, judgy, I was very, I made actually an evaluation, and then you can change it next time. Yeah.
Hmm. So you do workshops, you're writing a book,
Mhm.
you also stream because you are doing the 30 days challenge,
Yes.
creating a
Yeah.
product. You do talks. How can you be so productive? And what's your secret?
Well, it's probably always how it looks outside, right? But
Mm,
um, I'm actually quite okay right now with what I'm doing. Yeah, I always would love to do more. I always feel like I'm not doing enough, right? So I would like to add another thing. Um, for me, I think it really, so it comes maybe back to this balance that we had at the very beginning when we were talking about it. So I have two kids, and so with those two kids, actually unimportant things really they disappear. To be honest, right? I just don't have the time, and I'm very focused on prioritizing what I do and what I don't do. I definitely struggled more with that when I had more time, when I had a lot of time at my hands. It was very easy for me to, do a lot of work that's actually, it hasn't a lot of impact or is not very important to me. And now I'm very laser focused, at least on
mhm,
prioritizing and making sure that whatever I do really it feels like it has an impact, whatever that impact might be, right? That I just wanted to do it. Like the tool that I'm building right now is a tool that I wanted to do forever, and I just said, well, now I'm doing it, right? There is no, every time that I'm just thinking of doing it is not the day that I'm doing it, right? So the tool I'm now doing, but for everything else, I really see that work just takes all the time that you have and you give also, right? So
yeah.
I feel I'm getting more productive when I'm having a more balanced life. If I'm going more out with my kids in nature, if I'm enjoying more, then I'm also more productive because I have really a free head to think about what's important, and where do I want to be in, let's say 2 or 3 or 5 years, something like that.
And I think if you're doing what you really love, it doesn't really feel like work anyway. So,
I don't feel like working since a very long time. Yeah,
mhm,
I only had like a very short time during my university when I was working at a large corporation, actually, as a also in software engineer, but very strict rules in this organization. And also like we had like a punch card, right, where you go in and then it punches your time, and then you have to sit there at exactly for 8 hours and 50 minutes because every minute for break is calculated and things like that, right?
yeah.
And very similar to how this culture in that company was also the work, right? So people were extremely unmotivated there. So they were sitting, you were also not allowed to go and have a coffee, right? So if you had a coffee, others would look. This is just how management, yeah,
Yeah,
transported the message, right?
and that kind of management, it's never great if you want your employees to both be happy and productive,
Yeah,
because it just feels like you are in shackles and you can't do anything. And if you do anything, or even if you think for yourself, people will just think that you are weird. And the whole
yeah,
culture is against that anyway. That's how things were built. And the more freedom, well, between boundaries, but the more freedom you have as an employee, the more valued you feel, and the more you feel like you want to give yourself more to that work. So
yeah.
yeah.
So when I was working at Microsoft, we had a lot of freedom. As I said, I was at the office almost every day.
Mhm.
But if I wouldn't come, I could, that would be okay. They were trusting that I will do my work to the best that I can, and the people around me were really motivated. I mean, maybe you like to had somewhere the odd one out, but in general, people were super passionate, it's super motivated. That's how I experienced working there. And then at the other larger corporation, they were telling you what to have on your desk. There was a clean desk policy. You didn't have to have pictures of your family. You didn't have to have post-its. As I said, people were, if you're going for a coffee, others were also instructed to look and see, how long are they now in the coffee kitchen, and is that too long? And people were really afraid. Like if you talk a little bit too long at the coffee, they would say, oh, it's already 7 minutes. We have to go back. It's not official break time and things like that. But also at the same time, I have never seen people that were so unmotivated and so
Yeah.
unproductive. They came up with all different ways on how not to do their work, right?
Hmm.
um be it, I mean, some people played games, video games, right? But very secretly somewhere that nobody sees it, and so the whole motivation that the people had, and maybe the ambitions that they were like, how can they circumvent these really strict rules, and not be so miserable, right? So I wasn't there very long. I did an internship there, and I just thought, oh my god, if this is how I have to work, I just can't. But this was the only very negative experience where I had, that I felt like my work feels like real work and the drag to go in. I
Yeah.
was very happy when there was like the 6 months were over. But since then, during my PhD was the same, right? I was very independent in my work. I was very passionate about what I was doing. So I wasn't feeling like I was working. Was also a difficult time because I was working way too much. I
Mm.
would, my past self, I would also give a lot of advice on not to do that. But yeah, so if it doesn't feel like work, it can also be a little bit dangerous. But yeah.
Now that you say that, so there is always a question that I ask to the guests when they come to the podcast. And
Hmm.
you already said a bit that don't work too much. So if you're looking at a 16-year-old Michaela,
Yeah.
what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Um, Probably, yeah, probably to be less in love with the work and more in love with myself. Well,
which is
I would
which
say,
is a
I
good
would say,
thing.
take more care of yourself, right? So
Mhm.
people are exploiting a lot, right? So I definitely was used, especially people that are passionate, that love their work, that are young, naive, right? So I think workplaces can be, yeah, they're not really there to support you, let's put it that way. And so just to be more careful about that, and to think about yourself, how you set yourself up for success. I think this is something that I could have done better previously, and if somebody would have shown me how and told me, you know that I should do that, definitely that would be a good advice. Yeah.
I love that because yeah, we always hear, oh, maybe we should start networking first. Maybe you should start learning this technology first, or something that. But I think this is actually the first time that someone said, think about yourself, because
Yeah.
we are machines anyway. So if you don't take care of your machine, then you won't be able to do a good job and be productive and everything. And I've noticed that I stopped drinking coffee for the last 3 months. And
Hmm.
my first month, I was amazing. I was being extremely productive, very with lots of energy and everything. And then after the second month, I was back to normal. And I thought, that's weird. And I realized that the only change that I've done wasn't just drinking coffee, but I started running again. And then that
Hmm.
second month, so last month, 2 months ago, I had a really busy month at work. So I couldn't really, or I could, but I was just too tired to spend 1 hour running. So I didn't really do as many runs as I would like to. And I've noticed that that energy boost that I thought not having coffee was actually not because of not having coffee, but because I was working out more. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's really important. Yeah. Yeah, physical health is really, I mean, it's also something that I'm struggling with, to keep, just to keep it, and not to let it slip, and let others define your priorities, or also let your work, somehow define, itself
Yeah.
as the number one priority, but actually having a healthy body, and doing the best that you can do for that, right? Is so important, is so important. And I can tell you, I was very sick at one point, and it was definitely a, at least made worse by the fact that I was not taking care of myself, right? So I was, thinking other things are more important, and especially if you're very young, it's easy to slip into that spiral where you think, well, you can do it forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this kind of job is very easy for you to not take care of yourself because you're sitting down a lot of times, and there's a lot of unhealthy habits that can come with that. So yeah, definitely.
I think
Uh,
that, recently I saw a tweet. I Unfortunately, I don't remember who tweeted it, but it was a question, and I was really fascinated by this question. It was the question like, do you think you are a brain with a body attached to it, or are you your body with a brain, right?
mm, that's interesting. I
I
would
found it really
say
interesting.
I would say I'm brain.
Yeah, with a body that's somehow just, part of it somehow,
Yeah.
right? And I feel the same very, very often. And I think this is really problematic because we are thinking so much, right? And we are just our brain, and everything, like the sensation, the body, the sensation. This means also running, right? Or doing
Hmm.
sports. This brings you back that you're a little bit more balanced, right? That you're not only your brain and what you're doing with, I mean, a little bit of the hands, right? We are using the hands, but there's also not really sensation, right? There is not
Yeah.
like it's not very physical, it's very mental. And so, yeah, I found this question really interesting. And I also, I'm a brain with body, and it's really neglected, right? So
Hmm.
I think it's important to step away and think, well, it's not only, right, we are everything. And so, I think physical exercise definitely helps with realizing more that something is exhausting. So sometimes I cannot get out of my thought, like it's like a spiral or something,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
the thoughts are coming and I cannot really stop them, and I'm like the victim of my own thought and can't sleep. But you just have to do exercise hard enough that you cannot breathe anymore, and I tell you, all your thoughts about like I have to breathe, which can be so good. I mean, this can be
Hmm.
so good because it definitely, for me, it stops all these useless thoughts about everything else, right?
Yeah. Have you tried journaling? That I find it that really helps me to try to quiet my brain. So I do it in the morning, and if
Okay.
at night my brain is still on 100% doing want to do everything, I tend to sit down a bit and just write everything that's on my head, and that tends to help me to at least have a proper night rest. Otherwise my
Okay.
brain would just keep on going, like you say, on that spiral, always thinking about stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, I journal from time to time, but not
Hmm.
that regularly, especially since the kids are there. Unfortunately, I would love to go back to and to make it more a habit. It's right now it's not possible. But what I see for myself, for example, I cannot work in the nights anymore. This is totally unhealthy for me. So if I
Hmm.
would, I work until, let's say, 9:30, but that's really the latest that I can work, because if I'm working longer, I cannot fall asleep. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, I really think like work is a little bit like a drug for me.
Hmm.
And so I'm like completely on drugs. And if I would lay down, I'm getting nervous. I want to stay up. I want to finish whatever I started doing, right? So, yeah, the journaling, unfortunately, there is not really a lot of place that I can give it right now. I hope I will do it more. What I started doing a little bit is like videos, short
Hmm.
videos. Um, but it's also not very regular thing, like very private videos, right? Like a
Yeah, yeah.
journaling. Yeah. Um,
I was going to say that's where the routines really help. I when I'm working, for me it's a bit hard because it's shift work, so I can't really wake up earlier than what I do already because I already wake up 2 hours before the flight. So sometimes I'm waking up at half 2 in the morning to get ready.
mhm,
When I'm off, which is I have a lot of time off. That's the good thing
mhm,
of being a flight attendant. I tend to do the first hour. I sit down, write all the to-do things that I want to do, and schedule my day. And then I spend that half an hour just writing, free flow writing. And then 1 hour before bed, I tend to switch off all the electronics and I tend to just read or write a bit if my brain is on that thought spiral, like you said. And that tends to help me a bit. But it's one of the things that if I don't do it constantly,
mhm.
I tend to lose the habit and then I fall back to the same bad habits of staying on the phone until I go to bed and stuff. So yeah, that usually helps.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Journaling is, I think, a very powerful thing.
mm,
I also
we
like going back to old journals and reading what I thought at that point.
yeah, it's always interesting. I haven't had the courage to look at very early ones yet, but yeah, I think maybe in a few years, I think it would be interesting to go back and look. When I started this journey into wanting to become a developer, I think it would be interesting to see all the things that I struggle, and
Yeah,
then I was like,
yeah.
oh,
Also, yeah, I think sometimes it's really also surprising. I recently found a journal back when I finished university. And
hmm,
the interesting thing is, I finished university when there was the regression in 2008. And so it was really hard time at that time to get a job.
yeah,
Companies were just not hiring. And coming out of university, you don't have any, experience. So people definitely pass on you.
yeah.
And so thinking back, yeah, and reading then what I thought and how I'm going to do things and how it then ended up, it's interesting. Yeah.
Mm. And I think now we are facing a similar time with the whole virus situation. It's probably one of the worst times to find a job, but
Yeah.
also might be one of the best times to change a job because if you are out of a job, then maybe doing that jump or to technology or just that idea that you have in your head. If you lost your job,
Mhm.
just use that time to do it whilst looking for a new job or dedicate your 100% of your time to do that. That tends to help. Uh, we've been talking for 1 hour, so I don't want to take more of your time, although there's so many more things that I would like to speak with you. Um, if
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think could go on and on for
yeah,
several.
if people would like to find you,
Mhm.
you have a podcast which is called
Yes,
Engineering, Software
software
Engineering
engineering unlocked.
Unlocked. Yes,
Exactly.
and also where is the best place for people to get in contact with you, to talk to you, to listen to what you do, to read to what you do. So yeah.
Yeah, so I'm fairly regular on Twitter.
Hmm.
I think this is definitely a good platform to reach out or, to go get in contact with me. My website is where there are my blog posts about code reviews, my workshop you can find there. It's actually my name, it's michaelagreiler.com. But because this is so complicated, I actually bought a new domain. It's called awesomecodereviews.com. It's a little
Oh,
bit easier.
that's a good name.
Um, yeah, yeah. And yeah, there's everything there. My workshops are there linked. My book is there linked, right? Which isn't available yet, but there's like a early adopter or early reader list that you can hop on to yeah, I think that those are the places where mostly visible, and also on Twitch. So if you want to follow me there,
Yep.
doing my 30-day product thing right now.
Yeah, I will put all your social links on the description
Yeah,
and
cool.
also on the website where the episode will be live. So if people are interested, they can see all the things that you do, and they
Okay.
are a lot of things that you do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you so much for having the time to speak with us, and I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, you too. It was really nice being here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.